Coronavirus. Day 5,000. Oh, come on. Snap out of it, Meyer. Woo, okay. All right, I needed that. Okay, let's get back to work here. Today, I'm going to make a video about Xavion. Xavion is an app that I designed to help guide an airplane down to landing after an engine failure. And here's how it works. Let's say you have Xavion running on an iPad or an iPhone in the cockpit of a real airplane. As the airplane is flying along, Xavion is constantly imagining a power-off glide from the nose of your airplane down to every airport and every runway within gliding distance of your aircraft. Xavion then evaluates the margin for error of each approach. And whichever approach has the largest margin for error is considered to be the safest approach, and so that's the one Xavion shows you. So as you're flying along with Xavion is imagining thousands and thousands of different approaches. The one with the largest margin for error is presented to you as a little path of croquet hoops coming out of the nose of the airplane. And you know, as you're flying, that at any moment, if the engine were to fail, you could hit the emergency button, those croquet hoops will be locked down, and if you fly through those croquet hoops, you will arrive down at the runway safely. So what we're going to do today is, I'm going to give you a 2-minute whiteboard presentation on how the system works, then we'll hop into my real airplane, go on up, pull the power, hit the emergency button in Xavion, and glide down through the hoops to a landing. With a little luck, I'll still be in one piece at the end of this video. So let's start with the whiteboard presentation. As you're flying along, Xavion sets up a handful of spools. You see, think of these as spools that guide your airplane to the runway like they would guide tape. If your airplane was, your flight path was tape that was being fed to a runway. And as you can see, for this runway, no matter where your airplane is, it can grab a spool and be fed in to a nice, smooth landing. And if you have enough altitude, then it will take you to a spool abeam the touchdown point, and then spool you on to final approach and in. If you don't have enough altitude to come abeam a touchdown point, then out and then in, then it will just start you wherever you are and guide you in straight into final without running abeam the numbers if the altitude doesn't allow you to come abeam the numbers. If you have a tremendous amount of altitude, it'll circle you down abeam the touchdown point, and then out to your final approach point and back in. So Xavion basically spools your airplane into the landing. And Xavion runs these simulations for every runway at every airport within gliding range, and again presents you with the best possible approach. So this is the plan view of what Xavion does. Let's look at the profile view. And here it is. So what we have is a path clearly down to the runway. And let's take a look at that path. What we have down here at the bottom of the path is what's called best glide, VBG, velocity best glide. When you set up Xavion, which I'll do in my airplane for you in a moment, you simply go to your best glide speed, enter the descent rate that your airplane gives you at best glide speed, and Xavion then does the math to find the glide ratio, and that is your best glide ratio down to the runway. Now here's an interesting thing. If you have to use best glide to get to an airport and just barely make it, that is an extremely dangerous approach. Because if there's just a little bit of a downdraft, a little bit more of a headwind maybe than your ADS-B receiver told Xavion you would have, you're going to wind up not making it. You never want to count on flying at best glide to make it to an airport because you've got no margin for error there. Now there's another type of glide that Xavion considers, and that's worst glide. So what is worst glide? Well, worst glide is however much you're willing to lower the nose to drop down to your flight path down to the runway. How much are you willing to lower the nose? Well, the answer that I give to that question and that I coded into Xavion is maneuvering speed. In this case, gross weight maneuvering speed. Above maneuvering speed, if you suddenly pull back on the stick, you could break your airplane. Below maneuvering speed, if you suddenly pull back on the stick, you won't break your airplane. So, based on that logic, I use maneuvering speed as the fastest I'm ever willing to dive my airplane or give guidance to anyone else to dive their airplane to dive down quickly to the airport. Xavion will never ask you to go faster than maneuvering speed. because that's the speed at which things in the airplane can start braking in really bad turbulence or sudden control inputs in the nose up direction. What is maneuvering speed? Well, it technically varies with weight, but when it comes to wing structure, assuming your airplane is good for 3.8 Gs, which it is if it is a normal certified category light airplane, maneuvering speed will be at 1.95 times your clean stall speed at gross weight. And the reason for that is if your wing can put out 1 G at stall speed, then at 1.95 times your stall speed, it'll be able to put out 3.8 Gs of lift. And that's because lift goes up with the square of the increase in speed. So what we have is our best glide here in green, our worst glide here in red, and Xavion flies the approach, or plans the approach, at the planned glide, which is exactly halfway in between. And that's what gives you the great margin for error when you use Xavion. And so let's say you're a little bit below the planned glide. Well, if you just go to your best glide speed for your airplane, run a little parallel line here, you'll intercept the hoops. And if you're up above the middle of the hoops, go to worst glide, or maneuvering speed, as fast as you can go safely, your flight path will come right down and intercept the planned glide right in the middle of the hoops. So in other words, the thing about the way these hoops are set up is, even if you manage to get off the hoops a little bit, you should be able to get back on them without ever going below best glide or above maneuvering speed, which are the two ends of the envelope that we want to honor here to fly safely. So there's two vertical speeds we enter into Xavion, best glide and worst glide, extremely simple. Then at some point, we're going to lower flaps and gear on short final. And if you don't have retractable gear, it's fine, just do flaps. But whatever it is that you do to configure for landing, you can do that on short final. The hoops will turn yellow when it's time to do that. And then your glide steepens. And so this is the third vertical speed that we enter into X-plane, the approach configuration glide. And as you can see, the approach configuration glide is steeper, because once you get those flaps and gear down, the airplane's going to glide steeper. Your lift over drag ratio goes down because of the drag of flaps and gear if you've got it. So that's the third vertical speed you enter into Xavion, the approach speed. Then that approach rounds out, lands, and stops. Now your landing distance is computed by Xavion as your approach speed squared divided by 2 times the acceleration. That's just one of those algebra equations from high school where you have to figure out how long it takes a car to stop if it hits the brakes from a certain speed. That's the equation. And don't plug in knots or something like that and expect to get a right answer. You have to plug in metric units, meters per second, acceleration in meters per square second. But this is the stopping distance that your airplane will require from this VREF or approach speed. And what Xavion will do is plan your landing rollout to be right in the middle of the runway. So however far you touch down the runway, if you stop with moderate braking, you will stop at an equal distance from the far end of the runway. So Xavion keeps that landing centered longitudinally on the runway as well. And so what you see here with Xavion is just an absolute desire to have the maximum possible margin for error. Fly a planned glide that's halfway between best and worst glide. Allow a steeper approach as the flaps and gear come down. Center the landing rollout in the runway based on the aircraft's approach speed, and set the upper and limit speeds so that you're always above your best glide speed and below your maneuvering speed, which is the speed at which the airplane could be damaged from severe turbulence or sudden control inputs. So that's how Xavion works. That's how it plans the approach. It's always planning many of them in the background, showing you the best one. Let's hop in my airplane and see if it works in reality. Alrighty. Okie dokie. Okay.
You can see, of course, the hoops are constantly popping out of the airplane, showing the best possible glide. And as the aircraft changes location, heading, and altitude, those best hoops keep updating. Right now it says my best option is McIntyre Air Force Base. Look, here's Columbia Metro Class Charlie. You can see the outer ring, the inner ring, and it's very clear that we can fly right over Columbia Metro right now. If I were looking at this in a 2D map, I'd be deathly afraid that I was going to enter the airspace. But here, with this 3D map, it's obvious I'll go right over it. This is the first avionics that I know of that actually do three-dimensional depiction of airspace. Just a nice feature that really lets you operate legally, not just safely, but legally. Very user-friendly fashion. So we're basically flying along with synthetic vision in constant paths to the best airport to glide to in the event of power loss. The three-dimensional airspace visualization, make sure we don't have any airspace incursions. This is how you operate Xavion. And then if I start to turn towards this restricted airspace, oh, be clear, it's right there, just don't go into it. Okay, as we're climbing up here, let's take a look at another cool feature that Xavion has that no other avionics have that I know of, and that is indicated airspeed. If you look at the airspeed tape on the left side of the primary flight display there, you will notice it's showing 128 knots, 127 knots. My Garmin primary flight display hooked up to a pitot tube is showing 127 knots. It's within 2 or 3 knots of my indicated display on Xavion. How on earth does it do that? How does an iPad give an indicated airspeed? All the other apps just show GPS ground speed, which is a terrible thing to show, absolutely terrible. A GPS ground speed doesn't give you your climb speed for your airplane, or your flap speed, or stall speed, or anything that you would actually want to use to actually fly the airplane. Indicated airspeed is a much more important value to fly by. So how does Xavion know the indicated airspeed when none of the other iPad apps seem to show it? And here's the answer. Xavion knows the GPS ground speed from the GPS receiver. Then it simply subtracts the winds out from that. At the bottom of the airspeed tape, you'll notice the wind is 21 knots on the tail. That 21 knot tailwind comes from the ADS-B receiver. Xavion subtracts the winds from the ground speed to give us the true airspeed. Once Xavion knows the true airspeed, it simply needs to multiply by the square root of the air density to get the indicated airspeed. And so how does Xavion know the air density? Well, that's actually pretty simple. Xavion knows our altitude because it's got our GPS altitude. It simply consults a standard atmosphere table. Look up the air density at our current altitude as indicated by the GPS. Then it modifies that standard air density according to the barometric pressure and the temperature. So right now, our barometric pressure is 3022, and our temperature at sea level anyway is 20 degrees. Well, Xavion simply applies the standard lapse rate to get the local temperature, which you'll see is negative 10 C under the airspeed tape there. And now that Xavion has the local temperature by extrapolating up from the ground and the barometric pressure, it can make a modification to the standard atmosphere table to find the exact air density at our current altitude. Once it knows the exact air density, it can do an exact job of turning a true airspeed into an indicated airspeed. So one more time to walk through it. Xavion has your GPS speed from the GPS. It subtracts out the winds from the ADS-B receiver. That leaves you with the true airspeed. It then finds the air density based on your altitude, barometric pressure, and temperature. And once it knows the true airspeed and air density, it does the simple math to turn that into indicated airspeed. And indicated airspeed is what it shows. And right now it's showing 169 knots indicated airspeed. My Garmin display is showing 170 knots of indicated airspeed, within 1 knot of a pitot tube. What's so incredible about this is we have an indicated airspeed with no pitot tube. And aircraft have crashed because pitot tubes get clogged, filled with ice, knocked off, broken, whatever. And Xavion doesn't have that problem. It's a synthetic, estimated indicated airspeed that is not subject to any sort of pitot tube error. So that's a new safety feature in Xavion that I don't think any other app has. Indicated airspeed without a pitot tube. Now that we know our indicated airspeed so accurately, is there anything we can do with that? The answer is yes. We can estimate our angle of attack, right? We know that if our indicated airspeed is equal to our stall speed and we're at 1G, then we must be at our critical angle of attack. As well, if we are at the square root of 2 times our stall speed at 2Gs, we're at our stalling or critical angle of attack. So it's from G load and indicated airspeed, we can get a very decent approximation of our angle of attack. As well, our angle of attack is a geometric difference between the velocity vector and our attitude. Let's slow the airplane down here for a moment and kind of pull the nose up a bit. Notice the white velocity vector down below the nose here? That white velocity vector is where we are actually going according to the GPS. The magenta arrow is where the nose actually is. You may notice there's some difference between the two. Part of this is due to the angle of attack. Right? You can almost envision the angle of attack now, can't you? The angle of attack is the difference between that white velocity vector, which is descending, and my nose, which is climbing. So we have our angle of attack in a geometric sense. So we can deduce angle of attack two different ways. From the geometry of the situation, looking at my nose being above my flight path, which we see. We can also do it by comparing our G load to our indicated airspeed. These are two ways to determine angle of attack. And Xavion does a synthetic fusion of the two of these to get the best possible answer. And you can see as I slow the airplane down and it starts complaining about landing gear, the angle of attack is getting up to the orange. And then, if I unload the airplane and go to a low G, you can see the angle of attack comes right on down. And of course, with the power off, we start to lose cabin pressurization. You might notice an altitude warning there. So another feature that Xavion has, I don't know if any other app having, is angle of attack without an angle of attack vane. You see, angle of attack vanes are kind of annoying things to have on an airplane. They get knocked off, damaged, they short out, things go wrong with them and they cause accidents. But with Xavion now, looking at the geometric difference between the flight path and the nose, and the G load, and the synthetic indicated airspeed, we can deduce the angle of attack without actually having an external sensor that can be damaged.
Landing gear.
We can even pull a little bit of G here.
Landing gear.
See that angle of attack coming up as we pull some G, so it also works in kind of high G situations. But there's a limit to how much G I'm going to pull at 100. You can really see that angle of attack is the difference between the velocity vector, which is the little white caret down to the bottom right of the screen, and the nose, which is the magenta triangle, of course. Alright, let's build up a little speed so she stops complaining about the landing gear. So right now, just at a glance, you can see Xavion offers that no other app in the world offers at any price. No other installed avionics in the world offer at any price. If the engine were to fail, we have our power-off glide immediately set up, and this is down to Camden. So we know what we would do if the engine failed. Three-dimensional airspace, so we know exactly where not to fly to avoid getting in trouble with the FAA. Indicated airspeed without a pitot tube. So we have a much more reliable indication of the indicated airspeed on the airplane without a pitot tube that could break. Angle of attack with no angle of attack vane. A much more reliable indication of what the angle of attack is because there's no amount of ice or bird strikes or bad maintenance that would cause this angle of attack indicator to fail. So these are a few of the things that Xavion does that no other avionics do at any price. Okay, now let's do app setup. All you do is go to the pre-flight screen and then the craft setup. In craft setup, you go to glide, the glide menu. And the glide menu has these numbers here, and this is literally all you have to set up to get Xavion configured for your airplane. It's extremely simple. At the top of the screen, you clearly see the V speeds. It's nothing but a VSO, VS, which you should know. You should know your clean and dirty stall speeds. Look them up in the operating handbook if you don't have them on the top of your head. VFE landing and VFE approach. Those are your flap extension speeds. No and VNE, which again, look up in your operating handbook. You should already know them. Look them up in your handbook if you don't. And best glide speed, which you should also already know. Look it up in your handbook if you know it. And if your operating handbook doesn't say, because you're flying an experimental airplane, then you were supposed to find glide speed as part of your flight test in your airplane. Do so now, if you don't already know. So these V speeds are extremely simple. You should already know them, and it's absolutely trivial to just slide your finger around and along here and enter your various indicated airspeeds. And as soon as you change an indicated airspeed, the descent rates here start flashing red. They're flashing red because you haven't entered them yet. And so now all we're going to do is follow the instructions. There are 3 vertical speeds. It's absolutely trivial. Let's look at the top warning here, and I'll read it to you just in case you can't read text on this camera. Power idle, gliding configuration, prop red line. Stabilize at 165 knots and enter your vertical speed. Power off. So, what I'm going to do is exceedingly simple. I'm going to power to idle, leave the prop at red line, and lower the nose to hold 165 knots. It goes without saying we start this test at a high altitude for safety. I'm going to lower the nose to 165 knots. This is obviously the worst glide. Remember on the whiteboard I was showing you the worst glide? The most I want to lower the nose? This is it. I call it 2800. 2850. Well, no, I'm still accelerating just a little bit. 2800 feet per minute. Oh, 2800. Isn't that easy? Now, power idle, gliding configuration, prop, feathered. If you don't have a variable pitch prop, it's fine. Don't feather the prop if you don't have it. But you can still go to your best glide speed, which is 110 knots. So I'm going to feather the prop and go to 110 knots. This is obviously the best glide. Now remember my whiteboard presentation. I showed the worst glide and the best glide. So obviously we're simply descending at worst glide and best glide to teach Xavion what those are. It's kind of cool. If you look at my phone, you'll get the stroboscopic view of the prop, and you'll really be able to see that prop feather. Look at that prop pitch. Isn't that cool? It's not every day you get to see the prop pitch like that. All right, let's go to 110 knots here. So prop feathered 110 knots. The engine's at idle, but of course it's not doing a darn thing when it's just feathered, touching a feathered prop. So we go to 110 knots. We're just entering the best glide here. Alright, let's try and establish 110 knots. And again, it goes without saying we do this fairly high altitude. If you cannot feather the prop on your airplane, that's fine. Just don't. Just go to best glide speed. Okay. There we go. Alright, looks like my bird, prop feathered, call it about 650, maybe 700, maybe 750. 750 feet per minute. Okay, it's what I already got. So it's the same as I got last time. All right. Power idle, landing configuration, prop cruise. Okay? This is where we get that flare. This is where we get the deceleration of the aircraft and the flare. Let's get our prop up to cruise RPM. It's not like a mid-range prop RPM. I'm holding 79 knots, gear down, flaps down. And this is clearly that landing configuration. This is where we're getting, remember on the whiteboard there was that dip right at the end where all of a sudden the glide path steepened? This is that part. You're worried about, what do you call it, 1600? 1600 feet per minute. I got 1550 last time. So, 1600 feet per minute. So there we go, we've configured the app. That's all there is to it. Enter your V speed, which you should already know, and then 3 descent rates. Best glide, worst glide, and landing. Right, let's get the gear up and the flaps up. I'm not going to add power. Instead, I'm just going to go on ahead and just glide out of it. With an Evolution, you don't suddenly add power at low speeds because the torque of the prop is just crazy. So instead, you just do things like retract the gear and the flaps and just kind of glide out of it and then gradually feed into power. Okay, now that we've configured the app, let's use it for something. Let's start with the most softball possible use of the app, navigation somewhere. Let's go to Florence, which is right here. Go to Nav, Direct, K, F, L, O, Florence. Let's say we want to go at 10,000 feet. Then go back to manual map. Boom, there's hoops to Florence. Just like that, done. And of course we have our hoops. Of course they're at 10,000 feet. So all we're going to do is fly the airplane up to the hoops. Got a little power so you don't get the gear warning here. And follow the hoops to Florence. En route navigation. Couldn't be easier. Now, let's say that it was a little bit cloudy or dark, or we were a little disoriented, or we didn't really know much about Florence, and we wanted to have a little help with an approach there. What we could do is say, let's say, VFR approach to KFLO19. You see, all you do is just touch the runway you want to fly VFR approach to. And boom, there you go. You can see hoops. You can see a descent. If you look at the end, look at this. You can see the whole thing. You can see the hoops leading to Florence. You can see that three-dimensional control zone in magenta down at the end of the line there. You can see the hoops dropping down to Florence at the end of the path if you look really closely in the synthetic vision. And then, as well, the hoops are going to make a right turn to take you right to the runway. And so this just helps you find a runway if maybe you got a little bit disoriented, or it's night, or it's foggy, or something like that, and you feel like you could use a little bit of help getting established on final to a runway. Does not use the traffic pattern directions now that are standard for the airport. So be aware this is for advisory, and following the visual approach here is really if you're getting disoriented. Now, another thing we can do is fly an instrument approach. Why don't we do a full-up instrument approach here? Let's do one that's a little closer. About, let's say, Camden. Go to KCDN, and let's simply choose the instrument approach and fix. Let's say we wanted to take nav 24 at Catchy. Hit the button, boom, done. There's our instrument approach to runway 24 at Camden, starting at Catchy. This is like the buy it now button on Amazon, isn't it? One button press, you're done. Buy it now, boom. Again, to show you how crazy easy that is, simply enter, and let's start all over again to show you how crazy easy it is. K, C, and enter your destination, select your instrument approach, and the starting fix. There you go. We just entered an instrument approach. It's now loaded and locked in, and we're going to fly it. So let's fly an instrument approach just like that. And you'll notice we started with no preparation to speak of. I wasn't careful about where we were. I just grabbed an instrument approach to a nearby field starting in a fix. And all we do is dive down and grab these hoops, and we're going to fly an instrument approach just like that. The hoops, as you may perhaps be able to guess, are established at a smooth glide down to the touchdown zone. So we have a continuous 3-degree glide path all the way down to the runway, while honoring, of course, the minimum altitudes for each fix. So, Catchy, the next fix we're going to hit, is a 3,000-foot minimum altitude. Well, we're going to be above 3,000 feet. Why? Because it makes no sense to go to Catchy at 3,000 and then I-Bay at 3,000. Why drag the airplane along with power at 3,000 feet? It's more fuel, it's closer to the ground, it's less safety, it's not a better way to operate the airplane. The best way to operate the airplane is a smooth 3-degree descent all the way down to the runway, while of course honoring all the minimum descent altitudes. In other words, Xavion is always putting hoops up that are the highest of the 3-degree glide path to the runway and the minimum planned altitude for each fix. Look at this, Catchy calls for 3,000, but we are coming over it at 5,500. Love that. It's great, because it's a smooth, continuous descent, and I betcha will at I-Bay a lot closer to 3,000. which is where we want to be. And if we don't hit IBA at 3,000 because we're still a little higher, I bet you we'll hit Pugsy at about 2,000. And if we don't hit Pugsy at about 2,000, I guarantee you we're going to be down to the runway threshold when we get to Camden. So it's a smooth 3-degree descent while honoring the highest of that 3-degree descent and the touchdown altitude for the runway. So we are flying an instrument approach. This is a full instrument approach. And it was done like the buy it now button on Amazon. One click. Look at the situational awareness we've got here. See everything that's going to happen. We got ourselves, our path, fly through the hoops, which could possibly be easier. And still at the same time, we see everything that's going to happen in the future with this approach. Let's touch Woodward Field. What do we know about Woodward Field? CTAP is 123.0, so we can dial that in. We're going to runway 624, which is 5,000 feet long. Look at the weather right there in the center of that display I dropped down. 7 minutes ago, wind calm, visibility 7, clouds 3,100 overcast, temperature 20, dew point 16, barometric pressure 3024. Just like that, at a glance, we know everything we want to know about the airport we're going to. We simply follow the hoops into the airport. What could possibly be easier? Technically, I'm VFR here, so I'm not going to violate clouds just to stay legal. So I'll just ride up above the hoops a little bit to stay clear of clouds. Just to stay legal. Of course, I've used this out in IFR many, many times, but we're not on an IFR plan now, so I stay above the clouds. All right. And pass those clouds and dive down and grab the hoops. Look at that. So we're flying the approach, nothing but going through the hoops. We have an indicated airspeed, not ground speed. So flying an approach in Xavion is simply hitting one button to select the approach, flying through the hoops, seeing the terrain in front of us in 3D, the airspace in 3D, and all the airport data displayed right there in the center of the screen. So we know the airport frequencies, runway, and weather. Comically simple to use. This is flying an instrument approach in Xavion with awareness of weather, airspace, approach path, the altitudes. Notice Pugsy is a 2,000 foot fix, and we've just passed Pugsy and we're coming down below 2,000. Well, the altitudes are right on. As we get close, Garmin is starting to worry a little bit about the little power line short of the runway or something like that. Also see other traffic out past the airport. Camden traffic, it's Spring Blade 44 X-ray, final 24 Camden, low approach. Notice you can see this other traffic off the far end of the runway and it's wake turbulence. We'll talk about that on the missed approach. Okay, let's say that this is about as close to the runway as we want to get, and we want to miss. And the airplane's starting to complain about landing here, so it's about as close to the ground as we want to safely get. So we hit the miss button. Boom. Let's go to the miss. So as we climb up on our missed approach, look at the wake turbulence. You can see this other plane pass the airport. You can see those yellow little tornadoes behind him, both on the map from the top down, and you see them in 3-dimensional. Now, this is just a light plane because he's going 80 knots at just 200 feet above us. But imagine if this is an MD-80, Canadair regional jet, or something like that. Then the wake turbulence would really matter. So I've had a wake turbulence encounter before with an MD-80, and my head hit the roof of my airplane hard enough to hurt my neck. And after that, I decided that tracking the wake turbulence of other aircraft is absolutely critical. And way back a long time ago, the airlines were looking into using Doppler radar to try and solve the wake turbulence problem. Millions of dollars, obviously, would be required. Nowadays, we simply do it with an ADS-B receiver. Now, how do we do that? How do we know where the wake turbulence is with no Doppler radar? And again, you can see wake turbulence right in front of us and below us as we go to our miss here. And the answer is, well, let's see. Xavion knows where the airplane is, right? It knows that from the ADS-B receiver. The theory is the wake turbulence comes from the airplane. And so every few seconds, the airplane there in the lower right corner of the PFD, it simply lays a little wake turbulence egg. Every few seconds, a little wake turbulence simply pops out of the airplane. The wake turbulence, of course, moves with the wind, which Xavion also knows, and it descends initially at about 750 feet per minute. Then it dissipates over the course of a few minutes. So, with wake turbulence in Xavion, we know where the airplane is because it came in on the ADS-B receiver. Every airplane, Xavion world that's picked up by this ADS-B receiver simply drops a little wake turbulence egg every few seconds. Wake turbulence descends and moves with the wind and then gradually dissipates. Xavion simply tracks each of those little wake turbulence eggs that's laid by the airplane. And thereby, Xavion knows what the wake turbulence situation is at any given moment. And it makes it easy to avoid the wake turbulence of other aircraft. And no other avionics in the world show you wake turbulence that I know of. I've never seen any avionics at any place that show you the wake turbulence of other aircraft. And as a result, you're just down to random chance to whether you hit the wake turbulence of a larger aircraft. And hitting the turbulence of a larger plane can be fatal. Can't imagine why other apps don't have this wake turbulence feature. Alright, so let's get back to our instrument approach. We've hit the miss button, and as you can see, I just followed the hoops to the miss, and we have our little, what do you call this, a parallel entry, I guess, a teardrop entry. I can never remember the names of those entries. We've got our entry into the traffic pattern, as you can clearly see. And so, if this had been a real approach and real instrument conditions, really wasn't sure what on earth I was going to do next, then I would simply follow these hoops to the missed approach while I decided to plan my next move. Well, how would I do that? I guess it's time for a quick look at the weather. We go to NextRad. High-res NextRad. Looks like there's a little bit of weather over there. Low-res NextRad. Oh, looks like there's some serious weather way up here. Icing, freezing level. About any sort of icing forecast areas. Icing forecast up here. You can also see the freezing level. The freezing level is about 12,000 feet. So I can see that there's some icing advisories up at 16,000 feet. But the freezing level is at 12,500 feet. So it's easy to get down below the freezing level if I get any ice in my airplane. Take a look at wind and turbulence. You can see wind and turbulence advisories. You can see the wind at, say, 2,000 feet is, 11 knots going that way. And just touch any altitude you want. You get the winds at that altitude. So you have the winds at all altitude and the turbulence. You can see what the cloud tops are. And let's say I was in over my head a little bit now. I just had to miss the approach. I don't know what I'm going to do next. I'm in over my head a little. Just the VFR airports button. And every airport that's VFR is green, marginal VFR is yellow, IFR is red. And so during the missed approach, all I do is simply fly these little hoops, which completely guide me into the traffic pattern, or the holding pattern entry as well, while I simply look at where the VFR airports might be, so I can go grab myself a VFR airport to land at if I'm a little bit scared from having missed the approach at that field just now. So, let's go on ahead and now do the pièce de résistance, the power-off approach. So we're flying along here, and as usual, we have hoops springing out of our nose in the best possible glide. In this case, it seems to want to go to Camden. So, boom, there we go. We just lost power. Hit the emergency button. There. As soon as I hit the emergency button, our optimum hoops are locked in. And bring the prop back a bit. not going to completely feather the prop because I want to be able to miss the approach for safety just if I have to. And let's head for those hoops. Now, as you can see, we're kind of aiming right for the middle of the hoops path here. The bottom of the hoops, which I didn't really show you. Let's go ahead and turn so I can show you the whole path here. So I'm going to cut in like this to look at the whole path on the side for a moment. The bottom of the hoops, as you can probably guess and plainly see, are the best glide portion, right? If we were to be way down to the bottom of the hoops there, down to the bottom of the red, that would be the best glide down to Camden. If we are way up at the top of the hoops, which you can see up there, that's where we would be if we were just pushing the nose down. Just shoving the nose down for our maneuvering speed, kind of almost dive down to Camden. Where we want to be clearly is right at the middle of the hoops. That maximizes the margin for error. You see, I positioned this off to the sides just a little bit so you can really see the hoops. You see that approach down to Camden? Up at the top, we'd be diving down to maneuvering speed. If we're down at the bottom, we'd be gliding in. So we're just going to go straight for the middle. Yeah. Some YouTube commenters may be looking at my fuel, saying that I'm dangerously low on fuel. Not so quick. We have more fuel than you think. The fuel receivers of this wing are kind of closer to the back of the wing, and so whenever you lower the nose, the fuel sloshes to the front of the tank and makes it look like you've got less fuel than you actually do. Alright, so here we are flying our approach to Camden. We're right in the middle of the hoops. I've shown you the high and low portion of the hoops. We've got a medium propeller. It's not exactly feathered, so there's some drag there, but if we needed to feather, we could in a real engine failure to get some more energy. So one more little wild card we can play. I'm just not going to feather the prop today because I want to be able to miss the approach if I have to, just for safety. As we're flying the hoops down, we can see exactly that we're right in the middle of the pipe here. We can see we can maximize margin for error. I can open up this little display here, and if you look right in the center of the iPad, you'll see that 25 minutes ago, Camden reported wind calm, visibility 9, clouds 3,200 foot overcast, temperature 22, dew point 16, barometric pressure 3023. So there we go. Just like that, we have got our ideal maximum margin for error approach to the airport to set me up right in the middle of the runway, complete with the data for the airport, including weather and the frequency 1230. Okay, now what I'm going to do here, just because I'm not on an instrument plan, is I'm just going to raise the nose to stay above this cloud, just to stay legal, and then as soon as I pass the cloud, I'll just drop right back down into the hoops. See, just a little maneuvering around there to stay legal, and the hoops make it easy. I'll follow the hoops down and kind of dive down to the bottom of the hoops a little bit to get below this cloud up here. But if this is an actual engine failure, of course I wouldn't be worried about dodging a few clouds for legality. I would be right in the middle of the hoops, have the perfect energy path all the way through. I'm just dodging around clouds to stay legal, that's all. Alright, we're right on energy. Okay, the traffic is Timberlake 443, final 24 Camden. Alright, approaching the yellow hoops. Raising those just a little bit, bringing our first notch of flaps. And the gear comes down on the yellow hoops. We're going to lower the gear.
Aero plantation traffic 2505 little downwind for 24 Aero.
Right. Pretty green. Gear down, first notch of flaps in. Right on target. Pushing the end of the yellow hoops, bringing the next notch of flaps. right, let's head back to Owens. Alright, let's do some en route navigation. We'll just use Xavion to get home. Nav, direct, K, C, U, V. Let's say 10,500. Uh-oh. The hoops will go right through that restricted airspace. What do you know? So avoiding that restricted airspace is going to be as walking around a piece of furniture in a room. You go off to the right to go around the airspace. I'll set up a visual approach. Take us right in. Above your approach, experimental 844 X-ray.
Center 844 X-ray, Clement.
Hello, experimental 844 X-ray. Today a VFR Lancair Evolution just west of the restricted area. Like to transition our airspace, please, for landing at Owens.
Rush them up. X-ray squawk 0252 and ident.
Experimental 844 X-ray squawk 0252 and identity.
44 X-ray, thank you sir, radar contact a mile west of restricted area, altimeter 3021, advising we have Owens in sight.
844 X-ray has Owens in sight.
4 X-ray, roger, maintain VFR, no traffic observed between you and Hamilton Owens Airport, remainder present code T lane, change by frequency approved, have a nice day.
844 X-ray, remain this squawk, contact Owens, good day. Okay, so we've got our hoops into Owens, and I've just set these up as if I was disoriented, even though I'm not, to show how we can follow the hoops right to a quick visual approach if we maybe don't know where the airport is. Maybe it's cloudy or night, or we don't know the airport very well. It's just a nice way to set us up on final approach. Okay, so an interesting flight there. Some interesting little things went wrong, such as the iPhone overheating and running out of storage. But a pretty decent workout from Xavion, I'd say.